what is this? Good Thursday morning of the 33rd week. I'm getting goofier by the hour. Anyway, I'm just going to read. It's a very short reading from Luke, kind of scary reading, but let me read it to you. As Jesus drew near Jerusalem, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, "If this day you only knew what makes for peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. For the days are coming upon you when your enemies will raise a palisade against you. They'll encircle you and hem you in on all sides, and will smash you to the ground and your children within you. They will not leave one stone upon another within you, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation." That's a scary reading. Can I give you a somewhat humorous sidebar to it? I think when I was growing up as a kid, I don't know you guys here, but I'm 83, okay? And you got to go back to Ward Street in New Haven, where all the kids were. And I think somebody asked me once, "Where'd you get all your wisdom from?" And I said, there was a kid asked me that in class. And I said, "From the kids in New Haven, the kids on the street." And there was many a funny story, but one of the things we really knew, at least some of the kids, the more knowledgeable ones, those, of course, the Italian kids, they knew the end of the world was coming. And they knew a text like this was just a guarantee to them, and they saw it coming. We all knew we were all going to get wiped out in 1960. Do you remember that? Somehow the Blessed Mother had said something to that effect. So we all knew it was all over, but the smoke and whatever, fire and brimstone, okay? 1960. This was probably 1950. But I have to tell you, Marie Coppola, Frankie's sister, she was wise. She was a smart cookie. She said, she hoped it didn't happen because she had just taken a test in school, and she wanted to get the results. And she was afraid she would never get to see the results of her test. That was a cute story. 1960s came. Well, the 60s were the end of an awful lot, though. I think it was the end of American innocence in the post-Second World War. And there is a lot of truth in what our Lord is saying here in Luke's gospel. What destroys cultures is the and the nations that are built on those cultures, the deterioration of the foundational elements of a culture. Essentially, it's belief systems. It's the fundamental beliefs that lie at the core of the meaning of the country, or the culture, or the society. You lose that inner spirit. You only have as the externalities of law and, let's say, advantage. But in the end, it's hollow, and it'll collapse. That's the danger of any institution that loses its soul. That's why it's so important, whether it's in a country or it's a society. It could be a club, that you never lose sight of what brought you together and what holds you together as a community of belief, a community of commitment. What gets you up in the morning? I see that in religious life, the spirit of the order. It's not just keeping rules. It's the ideals of the order exercised in the way we live the life and live the rule. It's not by blind obedience, but a love of the life itself, and seeking the perfection of friendship and faith and vocation that brings us together. I mean that very sincerely. Do they have the spirit of the order? Do they have the spirit? Is your family, your marriage, have the spirit of the marriage? Not just the external obedience and the external and the order, obedience and service, but does it have the intimacy of love that forms you into a brotherhood or a sisterhood, a family? If you're married, a family. The spirit of love that energizes your relationships. I don't know why I'm thinking so much about that today, but I am. And you see, if you don't, what will happen is the forces of division, which are so powerful in life, and they don't come from without, they come from within. They're vices, such as boredom, selfishness, etc. Whatever, can begin to take a greater force, begin to acquire a greater force in one's life. And what was once an intimate relationship, intimate meaning close, becomes more distant and estranged. And sometimes terrifying when one gives up on the other. That there's really, and I've seen that. Anybody who's done marriage counseling knows the biggest danger is not infidelity, but lack of fidelity. Lack of active fidelity. Actually courting each other, caring deeply for each other. Okay? In ways that are unique to your very own specific occasions and your very specific relationships. The better marriages that I've been at least, privy to are ones in which the spouses actively pursued each other. They continue to do so. They continue to look out for each other. I told you this story. I know I did. I tell you these things because how I learn it. More things taught me on the street and taught me in my home than ever taught me in a book, believe me. My mother, the school teacher, had to get up at 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning to go to school, right, at 8, 7 o'clock. My father's a waiter. What time do you think he came home? At 6 or 5? He came home at 10 and 11. My mother was always waiting for him when he came home. And what did they do? They sat in the kitchen and talked. They talked in the kitchen. And after he died, and after so many years of complete senility, and he didn't even know her, and her absolute fidelity of visiting him, going by bus every day across the city. She grieved for his loss. She grieved for him because as long as he was alive, that's what she said, she loved him and she was going to be there with him. Not for him, with him. And that's the truth. When I think of fidelity, that's exactly what I think of. I have a thing from the newspaper. I told you this. It's a picture of my parents that were walking on the beach around 1982. Pop was already by then. He was really seriously demented. And they're walking along, and they're not touching each other, but there was a walk, and they must have become famous walkers, because that's all they ever did was walk and walk. But this time they were at the beach when they walked at Savin Rock, and the newspaper picked it up, and they took a picture of them. They had the article about them. I have the picture. I'm going to show it to my kids in class, because I want to say, this is what intimacy looks like. My mother walked with my father. My father didn't know who she was, but he knew it was the lady he walked with. That's fidelity. Excuse me. That's sorry. See, that to me is active fidelity. They were old together. And my mother grieved so powerfully when he died. Not because she was alone, but because she loved him. Though he didn't even know her. Isn't that some story? It's hard not to think of fidelity in those terms. We're called to be faithful to the persons and institutions we've been called to. To me, as the Passionist, it's the order, but the order are men. It's not an institution. I'm not called to obey the rules. I'm called to be a faithful Passionist in spirit and in life. Faithful to the men in the outfit, faithful to the men who went before him, faithful to the charism of preaching Christ crucified. Each in our own very uniquely special ways. I hope I have been a good Passionist. I've lived alone for almost 35 years. But I hope even in living alone, I have lived with the monastic solitude that is so part of Passionist life and in spirit, and that every day at St. Mark's, formerly St. Timothy's, I preach the cross of Christ, that I always preach Good Friday in the hope of Easter Sunday. I hope I have been a good Passionist, and that when I die and have to answer for my life, I hope St. Paul of the Cross, who founded the order, I call it the outfit, say to me, welcome home, you did a good job. You were a good Passionist. I hope he'll say you were a good Passionist. You did it your own way, you and Frankie Sinatra. You did it your way, but your way was a good and acceptable way. You made a difference.